All right, up next is the third video dropping CFE223, which is about as small as it gets, and it's a mess. It gets everywhere, and definitely smaller in comparison to the other two videos. The one I did before this, which is Varget, and the one before that, which was H4350. But with that being said, let's get this going and see how many consecutive drops we can get. 6.6 seconds. Now, keep in mind that this particular unit, which you can turn on and off, does zero out on the pan every time you put the pan down. So keep that in the back of your mind. Every time you put the pan down, it will zero out. Now, the timer, you got to take that in account. When you put the pan down, it zeroes out, and you can actually see it on the screen. And then it starts this process of bulk dropping, fine dropping, and then minuscule pulse dropping. You know, more, a little bit less, and fine, and then down to the very bottom where it starts to pulse individual specks of powder. And you can actually read that on the screen of where it's at, where it starts out at zero, bulk, fine, and pulse. So screaming 3.4 seconds. 4.4 seconds. 6.4 seconds. 7.1 seconds. 6.2 seconds. 5.1 seconds. 4.8 seconds. 4. So watch the screen here. You see zeros, bulk, analyzing, fine, analyzing, pulse. 7.3 seconds. 5.4 seconds. 'So this is dropping within the resolution of the scale of 0.02 plus or minus. And there we finally got an overthrow. And I think that was a pretty solid run. We are talking within 0.02 grains of the target, which, if you had something like a charge master here, you probably would never even know that and be totally acceptable. But being that the resolution of this is within 0.02, I'd say that's a pretty damn good run. So let's do another run here and see how this works. So I think I got these settings tweaked out pretty good. After this run, I'll go over them again. 6.2 seconds. or overthrew a little bit. So I can see that it's racing into that pulse a little too much. So I think what I might do is actually go into the fine settings. I'm going to start the ramp down a little bit higher than usual. And it's not going to take much at this point. I got this tweaked out pretty good. So let's try that. .2 seconds. 7.7 seconds. This would be a pretty typical drop for 223 or 556. 26 grains of CFE223. 8.4 seconds. Now look at the screen, it says 675.62, and I purposely write on the scale here 675.6 to 675.62 to keep an eye on drifting. Now, being that this zeros every time I put this pan on, it's really nothing to worry about. And A&D actually recommends that you do that. But it's a nice feature to write that weight of the pan on the pan itself. So when you take it off, you can see it on the screen and you can verify if it's drifting or not. So 6.5 seconds. .5 seconds. 6.8 seconds. 'And there we get another overthrow, but I think that was still another good solid run. You know, I could keep on tweaking around with this, but I think this gives you a solid idea of how this is running and how you can slightly tweak this out. I think what I'm going to do is ramp this up a little bit more, and I think I should be good to go. So let's give this another whirl, and then I'll go through my settings. Once again, we're talking 0.02 off of where I was shooting for, so that's pretty damn good. .7 seconds. 3.6 seconds. 4.5 seconds. 3.6 seconds. It's just insane. 3.3 seconds. 3.2 seconds. It's about the fastest dropping trickler I've ever seen. .8. See how many consecutive drops we can get here before it overthrows. There. So I think you get the drift of how you can tweak this out ever so slightly. But once again, plus or minus, well, it's actually hovering between 0.2 and 0.4. I think that was more than acceptable. Plus, you know, if you don't mind an overthrow, probably once in every 15, maybe once in every 12. You know, if you can knock off, you know, say 6 to 8 seconds per drop in comparison to what you're doing now, you know, obviously for every 10 drops you do, if you save 6 seconds, that's a full minute, you know, and if it's already dropping at roughly 5-6 seconds, who cares? Right? I mean, think about it logically. But just to go over my settings here, let me clip you guys out, get my tripod out of the way. So what I have been doing as of late, just to give you some of you guys a lowdown of how I tweak this out. And matter of fact, let me get back on the tripod. All right, so usually what I do when I first start out, when I'm trying to tweak down a load, and once you understand the method to its madness, it's really not that hard. Usually what I'll do is, say for example, I'm going to start a brand new preset for saving a powder. And that's what's nice about this, is once you set this, you can set it and forget it. You don't have to go through all this again. It saves that preset for that particular powder, which obviously in this case is CFE223. Now, get this focused here. Now, if I was to start over from scratch, what I've been doing as of late is I would pick a powder. I know this is CFE, but for pure example's sake, I'll go to menu. I'm going to select powder, select. Say like I'm doing CFE black, just for pure example. It's going to start over from scratch if you're doing this for the first time. Excuse me. First thing I do once I select my powder is set the vibrator speed. Now, what you want is on the minimum, you want this to drop out of the trickle tube. On the lowest min setting, you want this to drop just so it's barely coming out. So for pure example, say like if I select minimum of 40, and I can test this. I'm going to test the minimum. You can see the arrow's pointing to the minimum. Here's the arrow pointing to the max. I'm going to have it pointed to the minimum. I'm going to set start, and if I zoom in, you can see that that powder is not coming out, okay, because it's not vibrating enough. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to increase this to 60, start, and now you can see it's starting to flow out. And the name of the game here, at least with the minimum, is you want this to flow out as slow as possible, but as, how can I say, as consistent as possible. So I would say it's a little too much, maybe run that down to 55. Now you can see it's just barely coming out, but yeah, not enough. I'm going to move that back up to 60. And that's more like it. So right now I got the minimum set at 60. Now let's play around with the maximum. So I'm going to start at 100. I have the arrow pointing to the maximum. I'm going to hit start. Now you can see that it's really coming out now. Now the name of the game here is you want that powder to come out as fast as possible on the maximum without the powder coming out of the pan. That's the name of the game. So right now it's coming out pretty quick. It's not making a mess. It's not coming out of the pan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this to 120. I can see it's really coming out. And I'm not concerned about it coming out of the pan yet. I'm going to stop this, increase that to 130. You can see it's really vibrating now. Still not totally concerned about coming out of the pan. I'm going to keep on increasing this. And it's coming out really, really good. So I'm going to stop that right there. So I've now set the vibrator speed setting. So let me zoom out here. That's what I just set, was a vibrator speed setting. So I'm going to close this out. Now what I'm going to do is go to start. See this little symbol here? That's the AI feature. That means it's learning, the little scholar hat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this learn on its own so I don't have to hunt down these settings all day long. So what I'm going to do is, I know this is set for CFE BLK, but let's just keep in mind this is CFE223. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the AI try and find the best settings for me and then tweak it out from there. So what I'm going to do is I hit auto. Well, actually, I'm going to get all this powder out of here first. And this will zero out on the pan when it starts. Matter of fact, I can actually zero it out now. I must have some powder left in there. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to hit start. And it's going to learn. It's going to overthrow. And you're going to let it just do its thing. You're not doing anything in the settings. You're letting the AI do the settings. That little scholar hat's on right now. You're going to keep on letting it do its thing of overthrowing. And you're going to watch this. It will start correcting itself. See, it's getting lower. It's 28.26. It was over 30 before. See, now through the bulk, it corrected that. Now it's doing the fine. Now it overthrew on the fine. I'm not playing anything with the settings here. The AI feature, that little scholar hat, is learning for me. See, it corrected the fine. It's getting really close. And I'll bet money it's probably going to get it dropped correctly on the next throw here. Just like that, 3.7 seconds. So I'm going to let it drop manually with AI. Now it overthrow, so it's still learning. .5 seconds. .5 seconds. So you can see, if you don't want to tweak around with your own personal settings, you can just let AI do its thing. So what I've found is the smaller the kernel, that's 8.3 seconds, the easier for the trickler is to drop. The bigger the kernel, sometimes it's a lot harder to drop that powder. Bigger kernel weighs more, Doesn't take that many kernels to fall out of the tube to do an overthrow, especially when the resolution is 0.02 plus or minus. And some of these grains of powder, individual specks of powder, like H4350, is pushing that resolution. So it was 10.1 seconds. So if you want, you can just let the Supertrickler do its thing. You don't have to play around in the settings. .9 seconds. Pretty good. 4.6. Let's say it's doing pretty good here. 7.4. I'm just going to let this run, see how many throws we can get here on just AI, letting the Supertrickler do its thing. 5.8 seconds. And I think if you want, in my opinion, the smaller the kernel, smaller the powder, AI is going to have a lot easier task dropping that powder in comparison to a much larger powder. That's, you know, pushing the resolution of the scale itself. 6.2. There. So we got an overthrow. So at that point, if you want, you can continue using AI. Nothing wrong with that. I would say that was a really good run. Got some really good time results and some that were pushing 10 seconds. I would say that's a really big overthrow, 0.36. You can notice on my previous settings that I set, there wasn't a single overthrow over 0.04, only 0.02 off of what the resolution of the scale is. So now at this point, if I want, I can go into let me focus this screen here, go to profile, and this is where I start turning off. So go to self-learning. I turn off self-learning, so it's off completely. And you can see on the right-hand side here in orange, this is your throw settings. If you want to play around your final stabilization time, you can. We're throwing within a tolerance of 0.02 plus or minus. So how this throws is you put the pan down, you'll see on the screen it says 0, and after that it throws the bulk setting, after that it throws the fine setting, and then after that it throws the pulse setting. It's like a ton of powder, a little bit of powder, a minute amount of powder. And you can select your bulk settings, and this is where you can start tweaking this out. You know, so right now, if I want to, I could play around with this in flight setting. So this is the amount of powder that has left the tube, is in flight, and is about to enter the pan. You're going to notice if I change this 13.1 down to 5, it's going to massively overthrow. So let's just test that right now. So right there, it just overthrew. So at this point, if you wanted to tweak that out manually, not let AI do its thing, you can see an error of 5.6. So bulk settings, notice it was 13.1 before. I reduced that almost 8. So let's just try 7. You're going to notice it's not going to overthrow as much. I'm going to shut the auto feature off. It's still going to overthrow, but you can see it's less now. So go to bulk settings, increase that to 9. So what I have found, if you can try to start on your bulk settings to drop within 2 grains of your target. So to have the bulk drop at roughly 24 and then start your fine, that is preferable. See how this turns out. Still overthrowing. Go to profile, bulk settings. Let's crank that. Remember, we were at 13 before. I'm going to crank this up to 11. My target's 26. I'm going to try and get this to drop within, roughly. So I dropped a little powder on my pan here. So see the screen's still not drifting. Remember, we're at 13.1. I'm going to try it at 11. So you can see right there, it just dropped on the bulk setting of 1.5 grains of target bulk 25. So it's a little over 1.5. Let's say 1.5 to 2 grains for the bulk. So we're going to increase this up to 12. I bet that's going to be close to that, dropping on the bulk 1.5 grains below 26. See if it drops at 24.5 right there. Bulk setting dropped at 26. So still a little too fast. Remember, we started out, AI started out at 13.1. You can see we're getting close to what AI was figuring out. So 12.5. And once you've done this a few times, you'll fly right through the madness, trust me. So I think that's about right. You want that to drop about 2 grains below your target on the bulk setting. So at this point, I'll probably go into the next step. We just played around with bulk. We're going to go down to fine. And I want this to ramp down. Obviously, it didn't work right now. I'm going to increase up to 2.5. And in flight, I'm probably going to do it at 0.1 grains. And I can actually test this. So you definitely want to do this. You want to test your high and low speed for your fine profile. And what I can do here is go to test, and you can see your high speed, your low speed, and I'm going to click start. And if I zoom in here, you can see at 1%. So 1%. It is just barely coming out. So I'm going to increase this 1% to 2%, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can see it's really coming out. If I want, I can keep on jacking this up in tenths. So 10, 20, 30, 40, back down to 30, back down to 20, back to 10. I think 10's a little too much. You don't want this just dribbling out, but you want a consistent stream on the low end. I think right now 8 is going to be a ticket here. So let me zoom back out here. So I usually turn self-learn lock off. I'm going to turn off this testing, hit OK. Now you can see my low speed here is now 8 because I just tested it. And I'm going to close this out. And we're going to test this again. Right there, 7.2. So you can see my goal is to drop with bulk roughly 1.5 to 2 grains short of target. Fine kicks in after the bulk, and then goes from roughly 24.5 to 25 grains to roughly half a grain maybe of target, and then let pulse do the rest. So you can see this is pretty consistent, but in my opinion, a little slow. So if I want, I can lower this down a little bit. I'll test that once again. Now, the pulse is really slow on this. I don't like at the very end a very slow pulse. I'd rather have really fast, high intensity pulses at the very end to speed up the process. So in order to do that, I'm going to go into the pulse settings so you can see we're working our way down from bulk, fine to pulse. And I'm going to do a pulse test. So I hit pulse test. I'm going to hit start. And you can see that nothing's coming out. And it's really slow. It's pulse, 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 pulse. I don't care what your pulse test speed is. If it's that slow, in my opinion, it's no good. I'm going to stop this. Usually what I like to do on the pulse time, I've found, regardless if it's H4350 or Varget or the CFE223, is my pulse time on. I want really quick, short pulses. So the pulse time is obviously the time the pulse is on, and there's a pulse time off, but how much time you have between the pulses. First thing what I like to do is increase little mini pulses. I'm going to increase this. I'm going to lower this actually to 75, and I'm going to decrease the pulse time between at roughly 250. That's going to do quicker, more intense pulses, but to do that, I need to increase the pulse speed. The pulse speed is just the strength of the pulse. Obviously, the faster the pulse is, the stronger the pulse is to kick that powder out of the tube. Now, if I do a pulse test here, now that I've played around with that micro pulses, I still have it at 1%. Now watch this. Now rather than pulse, 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 it's actually going pulse, 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 pulse. So at the very end, rather than waiting for a pulse, wait, pulse, wait, it's pulse, 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 pulse. So I'm going to increase this pulse speed 10, and right now it's 10. I'm going to lower this down to 1%. And you can see with these small kernels, it's easily kicking it out. If it was a bigger kernel, I might have to increase the speed or the power of that pulse. So I'm going to increase this to, just to show you, for example, this is 1, this is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Way too much powder getting kicked out at 100%. So I'm going to lower this back down to probably I'm actually going to increase this pulse time between it. I think it's too fast. I'm going to do more like 270. Pulse time of 80. Let's check that out. Oops. Let's see here. Pulse. Do a pulse test. Start. So rather than that really fast pulse, it's slowed down now. Pulse, 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 pulse. I think that's pretty good. Let's go to OK. So you can see we're kind of whittling our way down the tree here. Bulk, fine, pulse. Final stabilization time, I think you can play around with that. I'm going to try 1000 for now. Well, let me stick with 2000. I'll come back to that. So let's try this. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to zero this out. I might have some powder in here. All right, so let's see how this works. .9 seconds. .7 seconds. 5.9 seconds. So by turning off AI, in my opinion, you're going to get more consistent, faster drops. You might have a, maybe, oh, that's pretty quick. 4.8 seconds. So there it overthrew, but at 5.5 seconds, but it only overthrew by 0.02. Matter of fact, I bet if I take this off, put it back on, it's probably going to hover between the 02 to 04. We're only talking 02 over what I was targeting at plus or minus 0.02, where the overthrow on the AI was much more than that. I think it was 26.3 if I remember. So what I can do is go into my fine settings and play around with the ramp down. And I want this to ramp down sooner. So 2.5. I think the pulse is pretty good. And this is where you just kind of tweak it out. And I think you kind of get a gist to the madness here. .1 seconds. 5.2 seconds. You can see it's a lot more consistent, pretty damn fast. Watch the screen. I'll say 0. Bulk. Fine. Pulse. 5.1 seconds. 5 seconds. 5.2 seconds. Notice AI is not on. This is my settings that I tweaked out from AI. And once again, overthrew by 0.02. You know, once again, I could go in the pulse settings. It might be just that. You know, you can play around with that. You can play around with your fine settings just a little bit. You know, maybe make this 2.6. That would slow it down a little bit, but get a little bit more consistent throws here. So I'll do this once more and I'll shut this down. .1. 5.6. .5. Let's keep on going until this fails. .5 seconds. You can see they're very consistent drops, very, very fast. And then overthrow is at roughly 5 seconds. But I think you get the gist of how to tweak this out using AI. And I hope this helps some of you guys out. I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm still testing this. And once I get a method to my madness here to help you guys to get this set up as quick and as fast as possible, I'll give you my final review. But so far, I'm pretty darn impressed.